On Christmas morning, Victor Prescott, real estate mogul and media darling, stepped out of his limo ready for a festive charity gala. But what he saw froze his breath, his ex-girlfriend smiling at him, with 3 boys, identical to him at age 6, standing beside her, dressed in red velvet coats, holding her hands, staring straight at him. If you believe no secret stays buried forever, comment truth always finds its way. And if you've ever doubted someone you once loved, hit like and subscribe, because this story will haunt you. The chandeliers inside the Prescott Foundation's annual Christmas gala shimmered like frozen stars, casting golden halos on designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. Champagne flutes clinked, a string quartet played Silent Night, and in the center of it all stood Victor Prescott, sharp-jawed, salt-and-pepper hair swept back, custom black tuxedo hugging his lean frame. Every camera knew his face. Every guest knew his name. But at that moment, Victor was barely present. His smile was thin, his mind elsewhere. His wife Clara had excused herself to take a call from her art dealer. Alone now, Victor drifted toward the fireplace, scanning the crowd out of habit. Political donors, investors, paparazzi in formal wear. It was the same circle he'd ruled for years, and then he froze. Across the ballroom, near the grand staircase under the 12-foot Christmas tree, stood a woman in a deep red velvet gown, back straight, chin high, like she belonged there, like she never left. Her hair was darker than he remembered, pulled into a soft chignon, but the curve of her cheek, the tilt of her lips, unmistakable. Lila. His chest tightened. Her name he hadn't said aloud in 7 years now echoed like a thunderclap, but it wasn't just her. She stood with 3 children, 3 boys, no older than 6, dressed in matching winter coats, red velvet just like hers. One adjusted his little cufflink, another held a small toy car. The youngest clutched her hand and tilted his head, curious, wide-eyed. Victor's breath caught. He knew that expression, that exact tilt, that stare, because it was his at that age. His champagne glass tilted unnoticed. A few drops splashed against his cuff. He stepped forward, pulse pounding, pushing past waiters and guests. Lila turned slightly, eyes locking with his. No smile, no fear, just quiet defiance. He reached the base of the stairs. "Lila," he rasped, too low for anyone else to hear. "Lila, wait." But she didn't. She simply bent down, whispered something in the youngest boy's ear, then gently herded them toward the side entrance behind the tree. A security curtain shifted. Within seconds she was gone, just like before, gone. But not without leaving something behind. Victor stood frozen. The music swelled again, mocking him. "Victor?" Clara's voice chirped behind him, her heels clicking against the marble. "What are you doing over here?" He turned slowly. "Just needed some air," he lied, adjusting his cuff. Too warm inside. But even as Clara wrapped her arm through his and smiled for the cameras, Victor's gaze stayed locked on the empty stairwell. 3 boys, 1 woman, 7 years of silence, and they all had his eyes. The gala light still flickered in Victor's mind as he stared into the dark of his penthouse bedroom. Clara slept beside him, turned away, the outline of her body traced by moonlight through the floor-to-ceiling windows. But Victor couldn't sleep, not with that image burned into his mind. 3 boys, red velvet, her Lila, 7 years ago. It came back like a storm. The scent of her hair in winter rain, the way she used to bite her lip when she was nervous, how she laughed with her whole body like the world hadn't touched her yet, and how she vanished, just disappeared. No note, no goodbye, no trace. It was 2 weeks before his company went public, a time when every hour mattered. Lila had stayed in his Tribeca loft while he juggled board meetings and broker calls. He'd been distracted, successful but never fully present. She said he'd changed. He thought she was being overly sensitive. That night he came home late. The loft smelled like cinnamon and candle wax, but the air was hollow. Her suitcase was gone, the closet stripped bare, one red scarf on the bed like a ghost. He searched, called hospitals, friends, even tracked down her cousin in Chicago. Nothing, no trace of Lila Monroe ever surfaced again, until tonight. Victor sat on the edge of the bed now, his hand in his hair. His reflection in the window looked unfamiliar, older, more weathered, less certain. He remembered the weeks that followed her disappearance, The press speculation, the silence, the loneliness that clawed at him in that glass and steel apartment. That's when Clara appeared. At first, Clara had been a breath of order. She was polished, poised, the kind of woman who never raised her voice. The daughter of a former senator, a gallery curator, safe, predictable, well-connected. When Clara smiled, the world stood still. But it never burned like it did with Lila. Their courtship was fast, public, strategic. Clara was the right move. Victor built his empire beside her. Real estate, media investments, luxury brands. They became a power couple. People said she saved him. But behind closed doors, cracks formed slowly like pressure behind glass. She never asked about Lila. Never had to. She had replaced her. Couldn't sleep. Clara's voice sliced through the dark, smooth but edged. Victor turned, startled. Just thinking. About the foundation's end-of-year numbers. Clara sat up, silk gown rustling. You're lying. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Victor's jaw tensed. Don't start. She tilted her head. You've been off ever since the gala. Who was she? He hesitated too long. That woman near the tree, Clara continued, eyes narrowing. You knew her. The one with the children. He forced a dry swallow. She's someone I used to know. Years ago. And the children. I don't know. But even as he said it, he realized he'd never believed in coincidences. Not in his world. Clara studied him for a long beat. Her voice dropped. Don't bring ghosts into this house, Victor. Not after everything we've built. Victor looked away, but that's the thing about ghosts. They don't knock, they just return. The Prescott penthouse shimmered with curated warmth. Garlands spiraled around gold-plated banisters. A towering Christmas tree glittered with Swarovski ornaments, and soft jazz hummed through recessed speakers. But beneath the polished surface, a chill had settled between Victor and Clara. It had been 3 days since the gala. Victor hadn't mentioned the woman in red velvet again. Clara didn't ask. Not directly. But silence, she'd learned, was its own kind of interrogation. She watched him now from across the kitchen island as he stirred coffee absent-mindedly, his Rolex clinking softly against the ceramic cup. He'd taken 3 business calls before noon, skipped breakfast, and hadn't touched her since they got home from the event. Something was off. And Clara didn't ignore intuition. It was her inheritance. You barely touched your sleep last night, she said lightly, flipping a page in Architectural Digest. Is the Prescott media deal falling through? Victor's eyes flicked up. It's fine. You've been distracted. He offered a hollow smile. End-of-year chaos. You know how it is. Clara set the magazine down, crossed to him slowly in her satin robe. Her voice was a whisper against his jaw. I also know you, Victor. Don't insult me with half-truths. But he didn't flinch. He kissed her cheek and murmured, I've got to head into the office early, Ollie instead of downtown. Victor slid into the back of his chauffeured Mercedes and gave the driver a new address, an unassuming brownstone in the West Village. The private investigator's office wasn't marked. Discretion was the service. Inside, Victor sat across from a man with a buzz cut and a face like old leather. Ex-military. No small talk. Victor slid a photo across the desk, a grainy shot of Lila at the gala, cropped from security footage. Her name is Lila Monroe. I need everything. Address, where she's been. And most importantly, the kids. The PI studied the photo. They're yours? Victor hesitated. That's what I intend to find out. Back at the penthouse, Clara stood by the mistletoe hanging from the entryway arch. It was tradition, a small detail she insisted on every December. But it felt mocking now. She'd watched him walk out without a glance. She walked into his office and typed in his security code. His laptop unlocked with a soft click. Clara didn't snoop without cause. But tonight she followed her instincts, their tart in his recent calls. A number, blocked, and an address in the West Village scribbled on a notepad. Her heart thudded. Victor wasn't working, he was hunting. She sat on his leather chair, fingers trembling slightly. Who was she, Victor? Why now? And what did she give you that I didn't? The longer she stared at the note, the more something in her hardened. She wasn't the kind of woman men left. And she wasn't the kind who waited to be blindsided. Not again. That evening, Victor returned to find Clara laughing softly with 2 donors over champagne. Her smile was impeccable, her eyes unreadable. "You're late," she whispered as she brushed past him. "And your cologne doesn't match the one on your coat." Victor froze just slightly. But in this world, power was posture, and both wore it well. Victor sat in his private study, a tumbler of untouched scotch sweating beside him on the marble desk. Outside, the rain traced lazy lines down the window, softening the skyline. But inside him, everything sharpened. The manila envelope sat unopened for 20 minutes. Across the room, the fire cracked. Finally, with a slow exhale, he sliced the flap open. 3 photographs spilled out. The first, Lila walking hand in hand with the 3 children outside a modest townhouse in Brooklyn Heights. Her expression was guarded, protective, maternal. The second, the boys at a playground. One on a swing, mid-air, laughter frozen in frame. The third stopped Victor cold. A close-up of the boy on the monkey bars, zoomed in. On his right hand, a ring. Gold. Oval crest. The Prescott insignia. A lion and a falcon above the Latin motto Virtus per Veritatem, strength through truth. Victor's eyes narrowed. That ring had been given to him on his 18th birthday. His grandfather had it before him. There were only 6 in the world, 1 for each generation, and one went missing a decade ago after a charity gala. He remembered the night Lila had playfully slipped it off his finger at dinner. He never got it back now. It sat on the hand of a 6-year-old boy with Victor's cheekbones. He flipped to the birth certificates, 3. Form's father unknown, mother Lila Monroe, Victor. Clenched his jaw. He had always operated in facts and leverage. He built his empire on certainty, outmaneuvering risk with precision. But now, here, were 3 living pieces of possibility that undermined every carefully laid layer of his life. He picked up his phone, dialing the PI. "Get me the mother's schedule," he said flatly. "Where she goes, who she talks to. I want eyes everywhere. And the boys?" the PI asked. Victor hesitated. "Get me what I need for a paternity test. Discreet, no contact with them yet." Understood. He ended the call and leaned back in his chair. A heaviness pressed on his chest. Not guilt. Not yet. Obsession. Because if they were his and if even one of them bore his blood, the life he'd built with Clara, the pristine narrative they'd packaged for the world, would crack like glass under weight. The ring wasn't just jewelry. It was proof Lila wanted him to know, without saying a word. A breadcrumb, a dare. But what game was she playing? And why now? Across the hallway, Clara's soft footsteps passed the door, paused, then moved on. She hadn't knocked. Good. He wasn't ready for her to know. Not yet, but a part of him, the part still haunted by Lila's disappearance, wondered if this was justice finally arriving. Not loud, but in small, undeniable clues. The Prescott penthouse was dressed like a page from Vogue Noel. Crystal reindeer sparkled on the mantel. Velvet stockings embroidered with monograms hung in symmetrical perfection, and in the center stood a 12-foot tree, white, gold, and cold. But the air between Victor and Clara was anything but festive. He sat by the window, staring out over the Manhattan skyline, glass of bourbon in hand. Clara watched him from the doorway, her silk burgundy robe cinched tightly around her waist, her bare feet silent against the marble floor. He hadn't touched her in days. She hadn't asked until now. "You're not even trying to lie anymore, are you?" she said softly. Victor didn't turn around. "Not tonight, Clara." She stepped closer. "That woman at the gala. The one in red. You knew her." His grip on the glass tightened. "Drop it." "I won't." Her voice sharpened. "Because for 7 years I've played the perfect wife while pretending not to see the parts of you I couldn't reach." He stood now, slowly. "This again. I saw the way you looked at her, Victor." She walked past the fireplace, her robe brushing the rug. "Like a man seeing oxygen for the first time," he scoffed. "You're being dramatic." "No," she said. "I'm finally being honest." He turned to her fully now, jaw tight, shoulders squared. "You knew I had a past. You wanted the man, the brand, the empire, not the broken pieces that built it." Clara flinched but held her ground. "I accepted the pieces because I believed you'd moved on from her." Victor stepped forward. "And I believed you actually loved me, Not just the version that matched your campaign for power. The words struck like glass, shattering. Clara's eyes glistened. You think this life was mine alone to design? I stood by you when you were drowning in scandal. I built our narrative, Victor, and I did it out of loyalty, not calculation. He didn't speak. She continued, quieter now. I've always known there was someone before me. Someone who could unmake you. But I never thought she'd come back. Victor's gaze darkened. What are you really afraid of, Clara? That I still love her? Or that she exists at all? A woman you can't outmaneuver. Silence pulsed between them like a ticking bomb. You're cruel, she whispered. You're cold, he snapped. The wind howled against the windows. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang midnight Christmas Eve. Clara walked toward the tree, eyes fixed on the gold-framed family portrait beneath it. She picked it up, stared at it for a long moment, then turned to him. You should know something, she said, voice steady. If she has children, and if they're yours, this life, this house, the control you think you hold, it won't survive what's coming. Victor's throat went dry. You don't know anything. She tilted her head, studied him like a curator inspecting a fading masterpiece. Not yet, but I will. Then she set the photo down, not gently, and walked away. Victor stood alone in a house full of perfection, each ornament and candle flickering like a mockery of peace. His jaw clenched. His hands curled into fists. He wasn't just losing control, he was being seen, and for a man like Victor Prescott, that was more dangerous than betrayal. The rain had slowed to a mist as Victor stepped out of the black town car and adjusted his collar. He didn't tell his assistant where he was going. No security detail, no driver upstairs. Just a name and room number in a text that appeared at midnight. Lila. Room 1612. The Langford. A discreet, old money hotel on the Upper East Side. The kind of place that didn't ask questions as long as the credit cards were black and the secrets stayed behind closed doors. Victor's polished shoes echoed down the hallway, the faint scent of roses and varnish hanging in the air. His chest tightened with each step. She opened the door before he knocked. Lila, same eyes. Older now, not aged, but sharpened by years of silence. She wore a simple cream sweater, dark jeans, no jewelry, no makeup, no armor. And still she looked like the one thing that ever made his world pause. Victor stepped inside. Neither spoke at first. The room was quiet, dimly lit by a standing lamp in the corner. A takeout coffee sat untouched on the table. A small red envelope rested beside it. Lila gestured to the chair across from hers. You came, Victor sat, slowly. Why now? Lila studied him. So you saw them? A beat. Victor nodded, swallowing hard. They're mine. She didn't confirm. She didn't deny. He leaned forward. You disappeared, Lila. No goodbye. No explanation. And now, 3 boys with my face. What am I supposed to do with this? Her eyes didn't waver. Wait, for what? She picked up the envelope and placed it in front of him. Open this. Christmas Day, alone. Victor stared at it like it held a grenade. What is it? Her voice dropped. Closure. Or the beginning of something else. I can't decide that for you. He reached for it, fingers brushing hers. Why not now? Because tonight you'd read it with rage. She stood slowly, wrapping her arms around herself. And I need you to read it with eyes that remember who you were before power turned everything into property. Victor's mouth parted slightly, stunned by her words, not the sting of them, but their accuracy. I deserve to know, he said, softer now. She smiled faintly. And you will. But not until this city wakes up pretending it still believes in miracles. He stood, their eyes locked again. The same unspoken language they once shared, now filled with cracks. I don't know if I can wait. You waited 7 years, she said, walking him to the door. How you can wait 2 more days? He stepped into the hallway, his envelope in hand. She didn't kiss him, didn't touch him, just closed the door with the soft finality of a woman who had already said goodbye once. And this time, she was letting him decide whether he deserved hello again. Victor didn't make it to Christmas Day. The red envelope sat on his desk for 20 hours, unopened, untouched. But every time he passed it, it pulled at something in him. Not curiosity, not guilt. Need by nightfall on Christmas Eve, the city below had slowed to a hush. Even the penthouse felt unusually quiet. Clara had gone to midnight mass with her mother uptown. a ritual she insisted on every year, more out of image than faith. Victor poured 2 fingers of whiskey, sat at his desk, and stared at the envelope like it might vanish. He opened it. Inside 1 sheet of paper, no note, no signature. Just a clean, official document, DNA paternity results. 3 lines. Child A, 99.98% probability of paternity. Child B, 99.99%. Child C, 99.98%. Victor didn't breathe. His eyes stayed fixed on the numbers as if they might rearrange themselves if he stared long enough. 3. All 3. He ran a hand through his hair. Heart pounding, ears buzzing. They were his. Not maybe, not could be his. The timeline hit him like a freight train. The night she disappeared, the missed calls, the unreturned texts. He had blamed her for leaving. Buried the pain beneath new wealth, new headlines, a new wife. But she hadn't vanished for no reason. She had disappeared to protect something, someone, 3 someones. He stood, chest rising, eyes burning. The fireplace crackled behind him, mocking the heat surging in his veins. God, he whispered, gripping the edge of the desk. What did I do? Across the room the elevator pinged. Too soon. Clara's voice echoed lightly from the foyer. Victor? He shoved the envelope back into the drawer, too slow, too loud. She appeared in the doorway seconds later, coat still on, scarf draped over her shoulder. Her eyes locked on his. Your hands are shaking, she said. I was just looking over projections for the Singapore deal. Clara stepped inside. Something shifted in her expression. She walked to the desk, too confidently, and opened the drawer. The envelope lay inside. Open. She pulled out the document. Read it, her breath didn't catch. Her hands didn't tremble, but her silence was thunderous. When she finally looked up, her voice was glass. You knew. Victor stared at her. I didn't until tonight. I swear, but you suspected, and you hid it. I was trying to protect you, and from what? Her voice cracked now, the composure breaking. The truth? Or the consequences of it? He moved toward her. Clara, no, she backed away. Don't spin this. Don't manage this. I didn't know she was pregnant. I didn't abandon them, but you abandoned her. Emotionally, maybe more. Victor's throat tightened. She left me. Clara stepped closer. Her voice dropped to a whisper. And I picked you up off the floor, Victor. I built a life with you. I cleaned your past off our reputation like it was a stain on marble, while you kept loving a ghost. I didn't know I still... He stopped himself. Her eyes were cold now. You do. He didn't deny it. That was the worst part. She nodded slowly, chest rising once. Then she left the room. No tears, no screams. Just silence. The kind that didn't beg for understanding. Just space. Victor stood alone, the DNA test fluttering slightly on the desk from the breeze of her departure. 3 children. A life he never knew he lost. And now a wife he was starting to realize he might have never truly had. The winter wind clawed at Clara's coat as she stepped out of the black SUV, heels clicking onto cracked pavement. She pulled her scarf tighter, lips pressed into a line. The address she'd taken from Victor's desk, disguised behind an old legal contact label, led her here. A quiet brownstone. No sign, no doorbell, just a single peephole and a camera tucked beneath the awning. Clara knocked once. A pause. Then the door unlatched. The man who answered looked like he'd stepped out of a war zone. Buzz-cut, creased face, eyes like steel. You're not your husband. No, Clara replied. I'm worse. I'm the wife. He didn't move. I want whatever you've given him, she said coolly. And everything you haven't. Silence then. He wouldn't like that. Clara smiled faintly. He doesn't like surprises. And yet here we are. Inside, the place was bare but efficient. Old surveillance monitors, a file cabinet, an untouched cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The PI, Garrison, handed her a folder. This is what he paid for. Clara opened it. Photos, Lila with the children, a building address. Routine stuff, safe. Then she looked up. What aren't you showing him? Garrison hesitated, then walked to the cabinet, unlocked the bottom drawer and pulled out a separate folder unmarked. He didn't ask the right questions, Garrison said. But you did. Clara opened the file, a bank record $750,000, wire transfer. 7 years ago, sender Richard Prescott. Recipient, Lila Monroe. Her breath caught. Victor's father. She turned the page. A signed NDA non-disclosure agreement. Confidentiality clause. Gag order on any discussion of relationship, paternity, or lineage. Dated 10 days before Lila vanished. Clara's hands shook. He paid her off. Looks that way, but why? Garrison shrugged. My guess? She was carrying the first biological heir. Your husband wasn't married yet. The optics would have been messy. Clara stared at the signature at the bottom of the NDA. Richard's scrawl, confident and cold. The same hand that toasted at their wedding. The same man who'd welcomed her into the family with words about order and legacy. He'd known. And Victor. Had he known too? She wasn't sure what chilled her more. The silence Lila had lived under for years, or the image of Richard Prescott handling the affair like a business liability. Clara closed the folder carefully. Her voice was low. He's gone. Dead 2 years. But he still controls everything. Garrison nodded. That's how men like him operate. Even from the grave. She left without another word. Back in the SUV, Clara didn't cry. She didn't rage. She simply stared at the city skyline. A fire beginning to form behind her. Eyes. Victor had always believed he was the one protecting the Prescott. Legacy. But Clara now knew the truth. He was just the last pawn left on a board his father built. The package was small, unmarked, no return address, Victor. Found it waiting on the marble console table by the elevator, nestled between glossy Christmas cards from CEOs and politicians who hadn't noticed he'd gone silent for days. Inside was a single flash drive. No note. Just black plastic and a weight he couldn't explain. He locked the study door, slipped the drive into his laptop. The screen blinked. Then she appeared. Lila. Pre-recorded. Months ago, judging by the warm light and the flicker of autumn trees outside the window behind her. She sat in a plain sweater, her hair loose, eyes tired, but honest. She didn't smile. Victor, she said, if you're watching this, it means you saw them. How are boys? Victor sat slowly. I'm not reaching out for your money or your help. I never was. She took a breath. I found out I was pregnant a week after I left. Not because I planned to, because someone made sure I did. Her voice trembled just once. Your father came to see me. I thought it was strange at first. We barely ever spoke, but he came alone. No assistants, no lawyers. Victor's knuckles whitened. He offered me $750,000 to disappear, said the Prescott name couldn't be tied to scandal. That a woman like me, messy, unmarried, was a risk. I laughed in his face. Lila paused. But then he told me something else. He knew about the twins. I hadn't told anyone yet. Not even you. I asked how. He said we vet everything, including accidents. Victor leaned forward, breathing shallow. He said if I didn't take the deal, he'd go after the babies. Use the legal system. Make sure I looked unstable. I had no family, no name. No chance. Her jaw clenched. So I signed. I disappeared. I used the money to rebuild. I changed states, names, built my own business. The boys know they don't have a father. I told them you were gone. Not dead, just absent. She looked down. A tear slid silently, but they started asking questions, especially Eli. He has your eyes, you know. Victor pressed his palm to his mouth. I recorded this because I knew you'd come looking eventually. You always hated not knowing, but I wanted the truth to come from me, not a lawyer. Not a file, me. She leaned closer to the camera. I never hated you, Victor. I hated what your name turned you into. And I hate that your father believed he could erase our children with a wire transfer. Another pause. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You should know. I kept the ring. Not out of sentiment, but to remind myself that I wasn't crazy. That it was real. That you did love me once. She looked down, then back up. You don't owe me anything now. But if you want to know your sons, do it as the man you were with me. Not the Prescott who let others do his cutting. The screen faded to black. Victor didn't move. The air in the room felt too thick, too still. The only sound was the quiet crackle of the fireplace, the same one Clara had stared into 2 nights ago when she told him the truth would destroy them. And now, it had not with a scandal, but with a whisper from the past, and 3 boys who bore his name without ever knowing it. The Langford Hotel lobby buzzed with muted elegance, low jazz, soft clinks of silver spoons on porcelain, and the scent of sandalwood drifting from the polished fireplace. But Clara Prescott cut through the space like a blade. Every inch of her was curated. Cream cashmere coat belted at the waist, high leather boots, dark glasses that stayed on even indoors. She walked past the concierge without breaking stride. She already knew the room number. She found Lila at a quiet corner table in the cafe, sipping tea alone, dressed in simple navy, hair in a loose bun. "You came," Lila said. Looking up calmly, Clara removed her sunglasses. "We're overdue." She sat without invitation. No greetings. No smiles. Clara pulled a white envelope from her coat and placed it on the table. $5 million, untaxed, transferred within the hour if you agree to leave New York permanently. Lila blinked once. "You came here with a checkbook?" "I came here to protect a name." Lila's lips curled faintly. "You mean yours?" "I mean ours." Clara leaned in. "You may have been his past, but I am the woman whose face built his future." Lila sat back, fingers wrapped around her teacup. "I don't want your money." "Everyone wants something," Clara said. "Let's not play saint." Lila's voice softened. "I want my children to know where they came from. And maybe who their father really is." "You're putting them in the middle of a war," Clara said coldly. "No." Lila's eyes didn't waver. "You are. By pretending they don't exist." Clara stiffened. "They look like him," Lila continued. "They laugh like him. One of them even folds his arms the way he does when he's lying." Clara's jaw clenched. "You think you're winning because you've stirred some dormant guilt. I've buried worse than you, Lila. Don't mistake silence for surrender." Lila leaned in now, her voice barely a whisper. "You've buried lies. I raised truth." For the first time, Clara's eyes flashed, but the envelope remained untouched. A pause hung between them. Then Clara stood, fixing her coat. "You won't like what happens when private pain becomes public scandal." Lila stood too, voice quiet but resolute. "Then don't give the press a reason to call." People nearby pretended not to listen. But the tension was thick enough to draw stares. Clara's control, once surgical, now trembled behind her smile. "Goodbye, Clara," Lila said, stepping past her. Clara didn't move. The envelope sat abandoned on the table, unopened, unwanted, and for the first time in her carefully built life, Clara Prescott had no offer left that could buy silence. Snow had dusted the streets overnight, softening the sharp lines of the city. Christmas morning was unusually quiet, even for Manhattan. But inside the modest Brooklyn brownstone, time moved with painful deliberation. Victor stood at the edge of the living room, unsure if he should step further in. The space was warm, lived in. Far from the pristine gloss of the penthouse he left behind, toys were scattered in corners, crayon drawings taped to the wall beside a bookshelf stacked with fairy tales and paperbacks. There was no marble, no grand piano, just life. The three boys sat cross-legged on the rug near the tree, still in their pajamas, each with a different colored stripe. They whispered to each other in curious bursts, occasionally sneaking glances at him. The middle one, Eli, finally stood and approached. His tiny hands gripped a toy truck. "You're him, right?" he asked. "The man from the picture Mommy hid in the box?" Victor's breath caught. Lila, standing in the doorway behind them, didn't intervene. Victor slowly lowered himself to the boy's level. "I don't know what your mom told you," Eli shrugged. "Just that you used to be someone important, and that you didn't know we existed." Victor's jaw clenched softly. She was right. The boy studied him with eyes too perceptive for his age. "So, what do we call you?" Victor's gaze flicked to Lila. She said nothing and just watched. "I think," Victor said carefully, "you can call me whatever feels okay to you." Eli considered. "Then, can I still call Mom Mom?" Victor let out the first honest laugh in days, sharp, sudden, almost startled. "Absolutely," Eli smiled. The other two giggled behind him, as if a quiet permission had passed between them all. Lila exhaled, just slightly. Victor sat with them, not as a billionaire, not as a scandal, just as a man watching 3 small versions of himself unwrap second-hand toys and tell him stories about school lunches and missing socks. He didn't know how to fix the past, but for the first time, he knew what the cost of silence had been. Upstairs, Lila stepped away from the railing. She didn't want to interfere. Not today. But the sight of him laughing, really laughing, with the boys tugged at something she thought had long gone numb. Outside, a black SUV pulled away from the curb. Clara. She didn't knock. Didn't call. She had left earlier that morning with one suitcase and a quiet message sent through Victor's assistant. I need time. Don't follow. She had always known how to exit with grace, but this time her departure wasn't strategic. It was surrender. Victor watched the boys build a block tower, listening to them argue about height and balance like it was life and death. He glanced up once toward the stairs. Lila was gone from view. He didn't know if she would ever trust him again. But this moment, this room, was more real than any boardroom or ballroom he'd ever stood in. And for the first time in years, Victor Prescott didn't feel like a brand. He felt like a man. The press conference lasted only 7 minutes. Victor stood behind the podium, flanked by his legal counsel and the COO of Prescott Holdings. He wore no tie, just a dark suit and a trimmed beard that hadn't seen his usual stylist in weeks. The cameras clicked. Flashes bounced off the polished glass walls of the 47th floor. I will be stepping down as CEO of Prescott Holdings, effective immediately, he said. The company will continue to grow under new leadership, but my focus now lies elsewhere. No one asked follow-up questions. The rumors had already filled the vacuum. Children, a mistress, an affair from the past. The whispers didn't matter anymore. He left the building without ceremony. That afternoon, Victor sat with his attorney, finalizing the establishment of a trust fund in the names of Elijah Simon and Noah Monroe. Each would receive full educational support, housing protection, and yearly wellness checks, independent of child support, and irrevocable. There were no public statements, no cameras, just paperwork and a signature. He stared at the pen for a long time before signing. A father. Finally. Quietly. That night, back in the penthouse, still legally his, Victor sat in the sunroom where Clara had once hosted champagne brunches for gallery donors. The space felt hollow now, full of ghosts with perfect posture. He opened the envelope she'd left on the credenza before she disappeared to Geneva. Divorce filing. No contest. No alimony. One clause, no press. She was many things, Clara, but she was never petty, only exact. He read the final line twice. You didn't betray me with another woman. You betrayed me with the truth. Victor folded the paper carefully and set it aside. In Brooklyn, the light in the boys' room still glowed under their door. Lila stood in the hallway with her arms crossed, waiting. Victor stepped out from the kitchen, 2 mugs of tea in hand. He handed her one. They didn't sit close. They didn't touch, but they spoke. I'm not asking for anything, Victor said quietly, I know. But I want to be present. I want them to know me. On their terms. Hand yours. Lila sipped her tea. That's not something you buy, Victor. That's something you show up for, over and over. I'm ready to show up, he said. Voice steady. She looked at him. Not through him, not at the man she once loved, but at the man standing there now. Older, wiser, scarred. I won't promise them you'll stay, she said. I'm not asking you to, he replied. Just let me try. She gave a single nod, and in that silence a new kind of understanding bloomed. Not reconciliation, not romance, something steadier. Weeks later, the boys ran across the park, snow boots stomping, cheeks red from wind and laughter. Victor trailed behind, slow and clumsy with a sled rope in one hand and 3 juice boxes in the other. Lila watched from a bench nearby, not smiling, but not running either. For once, the past didn't hurt as much as it used to, and the future? It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs.